The transport shuttle vibrated as it descended through the atmosphere of Kepler Station, humanity's newest outpost in the Andromeda sector. Maya-chan pressed her face against the viewport, watching the massive orbital platform grow larger with each passing second. At 19 years old and barely 5 feet tall, she looked more like she belonged in a university library than aboard a military transport heading to one of the most dangerous regions of known space. The other passengers gave her curious glances. Towering Crothery warriors with their scaled skin and razor-sharp claws whispered among themselves in their guttural language. A group of Vulcan mercenaries, each standing nearly 8 feet tall with their crystalline exoskeletons, completely ignored her presence. Even the human soldiers aboard the shuttle seemed to question why someone so young and fragile-looking was being assigned to Kepler Station. Maya had heard the whispers during her entire journey from Earth. The recruitment officer had made a mistake. She was too small, too weak, too inexperienced for frontier duty. Some suggested she had family connections that got her the assignment. Others theorized she was some kind of technical specialist who would never leave the safety of the station's computer labs. None of them knew the truth. The shuttle docked with a metallic clang that echoed through the passenger compartment. As the doors hissed open, Station Commander Vextar emerged to greet the new arrivals. The Crothery's yellow eyes swept over the passengers, lingering briefly on Maya before moving on to what he clearly considered more important personnel. "Welcome to Kepler Station," Vextar announced in heavily accented standard. "This facility serves as our primary defense against Nexus collective incursions in this sector. Those of you assigned to combat duties will report to Lieutenant Korvak for orientation. Technical personnel report to the science wing." Without waiting for Maya to speak up, he gestured toward the corridor leading deeper into the station. "Miss Chun, you will be escorted to the civilian quarters. I trust your research assignment will keep you safely occupied while the real warriors handle security matters." Maya opened her mouth to correct him, but the crowd was already moving. She found herself swept along with a group of scientists and technicians, all chattering excitedly about their upcoming projects. Dr. Yilmaz, a xenobiologist from Istanbul, patted her shoulder in a fatherly way. "Don't worry, my dear," he said kindly. "Station life takes some getting used to, but you'll be safe here in the research sections. The military handles all the dangerous work." For the next 3 days, Maya endured the same treatment from everyone she encountered. Cafeteria workers gave her extra rations, thinking she was too thin. Scientists included her in their discussions about stellar cartography and atmospheric analysis. Even the janitors treated her like delicate cargo that might break if handled roughly. She tried multiple times to report to the military section, only to be politely but firmly redirected by security personnel who assumed she was lost. Her personnel file seemed to have been misrouted, filed under research support instead of combat operations. Every attempt to correct the error was met with patronizing smiles and gentle redirections. Maya's roommate was Dr. Sarah Kim, a botanist studying hydroponic systems for food production. Sarah was kind enough, but she clearly saw Maya as a fellow academic who needed protection from the rougher elements of station life. "I heard there was another pirate raid in the Epsilon sector yesterday," Sarah mentioned over breakfast on Maya's 4th day. "Thank goodness we have those Crothery warriors and the Vulcan mercenaries to protect us. I can't imagine what would happen if we civilians had to defend ourselves." Maya nodded absently, picking at her synthetic protein rations. She had been monitoring the security reports on her personal tablet, and the situation was worse than most people realized. The Nexus Collective wasn't just conducting random raids anymore. Their attacks showed coordination and intelligence gathering that suggested they were planning something much larger. The pirates had already hit 3 mining operations in the outer system, and each attack had probed different aspects of the station's defenses. They were testing response times, studying patrol patterns, and identifying weak points. Maya recognized the tactics because she had studied them extensively during her training on Earth. That evening, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an ominous glow as announcement speakers crackled to life. "All military personnel report to battle stations immediately. This is not a drill. Civilian personnel remain in designated safe areas until further notice." Maya watched from the observation deck of the research section as three Nexus collective destroyers dropped out of hyperspace just beyond the station's defensive perimeter. The enemy ships were sleek and predatory, their dark hulls bristling with weapon arrays and boarding pods. Station Commander Vextar's voice echoed through the communication system as he coordinated the defense. All fighters launch immediately. Crothry Squadron Alpha, engage at maximum range. Vulcan heavy weapons teams prepare defensive positions. The battle began with a spectacular light show as energy weapons crisscrossed the void between the station and the attacking ships. Maya could see the tiny specks of fighter craft dancing between larger vessels, their engines leaving bright trails against the star field. But something was wrong. The defenders were being drawn out of position, their formation becoming stretched and vulnerable. The Nexus ships weren't trying to win this engagement. They were creating a diversion. Maya's enhanced hearing caught a sound that made her blood run cold. The soft whisper of metal against metal, coming from somewhere behind her in the research section. She turned slowly, her muscles already beginning to coil with anticipation. Three figures in black combat armor materialized from the shadows near the auxiliary airlock. Nexus collective infiltrators, their faces hidden behind tactical masks, and their weapons already drawn. They moved with practiced precision, clearly following a predetermined plan. Secure the research data and eliminate any witnesses, the lead infiltrator whispered into his comm unit. Primary target is the atmospheric processor schematics in Lab 7. The other scientists in the observation area hadn't noticed the intruders yet. Dr. Yilmaz was still pointing out details of the space battle to a group of graduate students. Dr. Kim stood near the viewport, recording the engagement for her research logs. Maya felt something shift inside her consciousness, like a switch being flipped from off to on. The careful mask of innocence and fragility that she had worn for the past 4 days dissolved completely. Her posture changed, her movements became fluid and purposeful, and her eyes took on a predatory focus that had been completely absent moments before. The transformation happened so quickly that even Maya was surprised by its intensity. All the training, all the conditioning, all the carefully suppressed instincts came flooding back in an overwhelming rush. She was no longer Maya Chun, the confused research assistant. She was Agent Designation Nightingale, one of Earth's most classified defensive assets. The lead infiltrator raised his energy rifle toward the group of scientists, his finger moving toward the trigger. That was when Maya moved. She covered the 30-foot distance between herself and the nearest infiltrator in less than 2 seconds, her small frame moving with impossible speed and precision. Her first strike caught the enemy soldier in the solar plexus with enough force to crack his body armor. Before he could even register what was happening, her elbow connected with his temple, and he crumpled to the floor unconscious. The second infiltrator spun toward the commotion, but Maya was already inside his weapon's effective range. She grabbed his rifle barrel and twisted, using the soldier's own momentum to send him sprawling into a bank of monitoring equipment. Sparks flew as expensive instruments shattered under his impact. The third infiltrator managed to get a shot off, but Maya had already anticipated his firing solution. She rolled to her left, came up behind a support pillar, and launched herself into a spinning kick that caught the soldier square in the chest. He flew backward through the open doorway of a storage compartment, and Maya slammed the door shut behind him. The entire engagement had lasted less than 10 seconds. The research section fell completely silent except for the distant sounds of space battle and the soft groaning of the unconscious infiltrators. Every scientist in the observation area stared at Maya with expressions of absolute shock and disbelief. Dr. Yilmaz's mouth hung open as he tried to process what he had just witnessed. Maya, what just happened? Maya straightened her civilian clothes and checked the zip tie restraint she had used to secure the unconscious infiltrators. When she looked up, her expression had returned to something resembling the shy research assistant they thought they knew, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I think, she said quietly, there's been a misunderstanding about my assignment to this station. Station Commander Vextar arrived in the research section within minutes, flanked by a squad of Crothry warriors whose claws were already extended for combat. They had expected to find a massacre based on the security alerts that had triggered when the infiltrators breached the auxiliary airlock. Instead, they found 3 unconscious Nexus Collective soldiers neatly restrained and a group of very confused scientists. The commander's yellow eyes swept the scene, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His security chief, a massive Crothry named Tarkvan, sniffed the air and growled low in his throat. "I smell combat pheromones," Tarkvan reported in his species' guttural language. "Recent violence, but no blood. How is this possible?" Vextar's gaze settled on Maya, who stood quietly near the viewport with her hands clasped behind her back. She looked exactly as she had when she first arrived on the station, small, young, and apparently harmless. But something in her posture had changed in a way the experienced commander couldn't quite identify. "Explain what happened here," Vextar demanded, addressing the group of scientists. Dr. Yilmaz stepped forward, still visibly shaken. "The infiltrators came through the auxiliary airlock while we were watching the space battle. They had weapons drawn and were clearly intending to take hostages or steal research data." He paused, glancing uncertainly at Maya. "Then, Miss Chun, she moved faster than anything I've ever seen. She disabled all 3 soldiers before any of us even realized what was happening." The Crothry security chief examined the unconscious infiltrators with professional interest. "These are elite Nexus commandos," he observed. "Their equipment is military-grade. Their conditioning is extensive. It would take a squad of trained warriors to neutralize them without casualties." Vextar's attention focused entirely on Maya. "You will accompany me to my office immediately. The rest of you will remain here until security teams can conduct full debriefings." The walk through the station corridors was tense and silent. Maya noticed how differently the various alien personnel looked at her now. Word of the incident had already begun to spread through the station's informal communication networks, and beings who had previously ignored her completely now watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. Vextar's office was spartanly furnished, reflecting Crothry military traditions. The commander settled behind his desk and activated privacy screens that would prevent any electronic surveillance of their conversation. "Your personnel file lists you as Maya Chun, age 19, assigned to xenogeology research support," Vextar began. "Born in San Francisco, educated at Stanford University, no military training or combat experience noted anywhere in your record." Maya remained standing at attention, her expression neutral. "That file contains certain inaccuracies, Commander. I suspected as much." Vextar leaned back in his chair, his claws drumming against the desktop. "The question is whether you're going to tell me the truth, or whether I need to contact Earth Command directly." For a long moment, Maya considered her options. Her assignment to Kepler Station had been meant to remain completely covert, her true identity hidden even from the station's commanding officers. But the infiltrator attack had forced her hand, and maintaining her cover was no longer possible. "My name is Maya Chun," she said finally, "but I'm 26 years old, not 19. I hold a rank of Lieutenant Commander in Earth Defense Force Special Operations. My assignment classification is Need-to-Know Level 7. Vextar's pupils dilated, a sign of intense interest among his species. "Level 7? I have Level 5 clearance, and I've never even heard of Level 7 assignments." "The program is called Project Nightingale," Maya continued. "Earth has been secretly developing enhanced human operatives for deep cover assignments in hostile or sensitive locations. My mission here is to monitor Nexus collective activity and assess potential threats to human colonies in this sector." The commander stood and began pacing behind his desk, a habit he had developed when processing unexpected information. "Enhanced how? What I witnessed in the research section exceeded normal human physical capabilities." Maya hesitated, then decided that full disclosure was necessary under the circumstances. "Combination of genetic optimization, enhanced reflexes through neural conditioning, and combat training that began when I was 12 years old. The apparent physical weakness is deliberate. We're trained to use our smaller size and unassuming appearance as tactical advantages." "And your true assessment of the Nexus threat?" "Worse than your intelligence reports suggest," Maya replied grimly. Today's attack wasn't just a raid. They were conducting detailed reconnaissance for a much larger operation. Based on the infiltration patterns I observed, I estimate they're planning a full-scale assault on this station within the next 72 hours. Vextar stopped pacing and fixed her with an intense stare. You gathered all this from a 10-second engagement. The infiltrators were using Xerion-class tactical equipment, which indicates Tier 1 operational funding. Their movement patterns suggested they had detailed schematics of the station's internal layout. Most importantly, they specifically targeted the atmospheric processor research data, which means they're planning something that requires detailed knowledge of our life support systems. The implications hit Vextar immediately. The atmospheric processors were the station's most critical vulnerability. If the Nexus Collective could disable or sabotage them, thousands of beings would suffocate within hours. It was the perfect weapon for forcing a surrender without damaging the station's valuable infrastructure. Why didn't Earth Command inform me that they were placing an operative on my station? Maya's expression remained carefully neutral, but Vextar caught a flicker of something that might have been regret. Because the threat assessment included the possibility of infiltration at the command level, my orders were to maintain complete operational security until I could verify the loyalty and competence of local leadership. The Crothry commander felt his scales bristle, an involuntary reaction to what he perceived as an insult. You were evaluating me? Not just you. Everyone with access to critical systems or strategic information. Maya's tone remained professional, but she could see the anger building in Vextar's posture. The evaluation is complete. Based on your tactical decisions during today's engagement and your immediate response to the security breach, I assess you as both competent and trustworthy. Vextar's anger faded slightly, replaced by grudging respect. And if you had reached a different conclusion, then my secondary mission parameters would have become active. The commander didn't ask for clarification, but they both understood the implication. Project Nightingale operatives were not just observers. They were capable of taking direct action to neutralize threats, regardless of their origin. An urgent chime from Vextar's communication console interrupted their conversation. The station's sensor operator appeared on the main screen, his crystalline Velkin features reflecting obvious concern. Commander, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace distortions in the outer system. At least 20 large vessels are preparing to drop into normal space. Vextar and Maya exchange a look. The main assault was beginning ahead of schedule. Battle stations, the commander ordered immediately. All defensive systems online. Prepare for incoming hostiles. As alarms began blaring throughout the station, Maya stepped toward the door. Commander, I request permission to coordinate with your tactical teams. The Nexus Collective is about to discover that their intelligence regarding this station's defensive capabilities is incomplete. Vextar nodded grimly. Permission granted, Lieutenant Commander. Show them what humans are really capable of. Maya allowed herself a small, predatory smile as she headed toward the command center. With pleasure, sir. The battle for Kepler Station was about to begin, and the Nexus Collective had no idea what they were really up against. They had planned their assault based on the assumption that humans were weak, inexperienced newcomers to galactic warfare. They were about to learn that assumption was both dangerous and potentially fatal. In the command center, alien warriors who had dismissed Maya as irrelevant just days earlier now watched with new respect as she took her position at a tactical console. The shy research assistant was gone completely, replaced by something far more dangerous and competent. The real war was about to begin. The main display screen in Kepler Station's command center showed a sight that chilled every defender to their core. 23 Nexus Collective warships had dropped out of hyperspace in a perfect attack formation, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce the station to scrap metal within minutes. Maya stood at the tactical console, her fingers dancing across holographic controls within human precision. The other command staff watched in fascination as she pulled up detailed schematics of enemy ship configurations, weapon specifications, and tactical deployment patterns. How do you have access to classified Nexus vessel data? Lieutenant Korvak, the station's weapons officer, asked with obvious suspicion. Earth intelligence has been monitoring Nexus operations for longer than most people realize, Maya replied without taking her eyes off the displays. Commander, I recommend we abandon the standard defensive posture and implement what my people call a honeypot strategy. Vextar leaned over the tactical display, studying the enemy formation. Explain. Maya's fingers highlighted several key points on the enemy fleet arrangement. They've positioned their heavy assault ships to cover the primary approach vectors, expecting us to either try to fight them directly or attempt to flee toward the hyperspace jump point. Either response plays into their tactical advantages. She zoomed in on the station's own defensive systems. Instead, we let them think they're winning. We stage a controlled retreat that draws their boarding parties deep into the station's interior, where their numerical advantage becomes irrelevant. The Velkin security chief, Theron, clicked his crystalline claws together skeptically. You propose we allow enemy forces to board the station? This seems like surrender, not strategy. It would be suicide for a normal defensive force, Maya acknowledged. But they're not expecting Project Nightingale protocols. Before anyone could ask for clarification, the lead Nexus ship opened communications. A holographic projection materialized in the center of the command center, showing a tall humanoid figure in elaborate battle armor. The being's face was hidden behind a tactical mask, but his voice carried the unmistakable arrogance of someone accustomed to easy victories. Station Commander, I am War Leader Kythex of the Nexus Collective. Your defensive positions are hopeless. Surrender immediately, and your civilian personnel will be spared. Resist, and we will take the station anyway, but with considerable bloodshed. Vextar's scales bristled with anger, but Maya caught his eye and shook her head almost imperceptibly. Understanding her signal, the commander forced himself to sound defeated. War Leader Kythex, we are prepared to discuss terms. Our defensive systems are no match for your fleet. Kythex's laugh was cold and mocking. Wise decision, Commander. Lower your shields and prepare to receive our boarding parties. Any attempt at deception will result in the immediate destruction of your life support systems. The transmission ended, and Vextar turned to Maya with concern. Are you certain about this strategy? If your plan fails, we will have invited the enemy directly into our most vulnerable areas. Maya was already activating hidden command sequences that most of the bridge crew had never seen before. Commander, please order all civilian personnel to evacuate to the central core sections. All military personnel should stage a fighting retreat according to standard protocols, but do not, under any circumstances, attempt to actually stop the boarding parties from advancing. This contradicts every tactical principle I know, Lieutenant Korvac protested. That's because you're thinking like conventional military, Maya replied. The Nexus Collective has spent decades studying traditional galactic warfare tactics. They know exactly how Crothery, Velkin, and most other species fight, but they've never encountered human unconventional warfare techniques. The enemy boarding pods began launching from the Nexus ships, their trajectories targeting key docking ports and external airlocks. Maya watched the attack develop with the calm focus of a chess master observing her opponent's opening moves. All teams begin tactical withdrawal, she announced over the communication system. Remember, make it look convincing, but don't actually try to win these engagements. What followed was a carefully choreographed dance of apparent defeat. Crothery warriors fought fiercely at the primary docking bays, then fell back when overwhelmed by superior numbers. Velkin heavy weapons teams made token resistance before retreating deeper into the station. Human security personnel staged running battles through the corridors, always giving ground at crucial moments. To external observers, it looked like Kepler Station was being systematically overrun by superior Nexus forces. The enemy boarding parties advanced rapidly through the outer sections, securing key tactical positions exactly as their battle plan required. Maya monitored every engagement from the command center, tracking the progress of nearly 800 Nexus soldiers as they spread throughout the station's infrastructure. Her enhanced awareness allowed her to process information streams from dozens of sources simultaneously: security cameras, atmospheric sensors, communication intercepts, and biometric readings from the station's personnel. Phase 1 complete, she announced to the command staff. Nexus forces have committed approximately 60% of their boarding strength to interior positions. They're now operating according to predictable urban warfare protocols. Vextar studied the tactical display, showing red enemy markers scattered throughout the station. I hope you know what you're doing, Lieutenant Commander. We just allowed them to seize control of our primary life support junctions. Exactly where we want them, Maya replied with grim satisfaction. Computer, activate Nightingale Protocol 77 Alpha. The station's main computer responded with a voice that most of the command crew had never heard before. Nightingale Protocols active. Au nom essentiel personnel confirme secure position. Initiating combat-optimized life support configuration. The lights throughout Kepler Station shifted to a red emergency configuration. But this wasn't the chaotic red of normal crisis lighting. This was something far more deliberate and ominous. Maya's tactical console displayed new information streams that revealed the true extent of her preparations. Over the past 4 days, while everyone thought she was a confused research assistant, Maya had been secretly installing microfusion charges at critical structural points throughout the station. She had reconfigured life support systems to allow for rapid atmospheric modification. Most importantly, she had been tracking the movement patterns and behavioral habits of every person aboard the station. Commander, I need you to patch me into the station-wide communication system, Maya requested. When the connection was established, Maya's voice echoed through every corridor and compartment of Kepler Station. But the person speaking was no longer the shy young woman who had arrived on the transport shuttle. This was Agent Nightingale, and her voice carried the cold authority of someone trained to end conflicts decisively. Attention Nexus collective forces currently aboard this station. You have 60 seconds to lay down your weapons and surrender unconditionally. This is your only warning. In a command center, the alien staff stared at Maya in shock. Even Vextar seemed taken aback by the complete transformation in her demeanor. The response from the Nexus forces was predictable. War leader Kythex's voice came over the communication channels, filled with anger and contempt. Human child, you are in no position to make threats. My forces control your critical systems. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. Maya's smile was predatory and completely without warmth. Computer, implement Nightingale Protocol 77 Bravo. Authorization code Phoenix 990. Authorization confirmed. Beginning tactical modification of station environment. What happened next would be studied by military strategists for decades afterward. The station's life support systems didn't simply malfunction, they became weapons. Atmospheric pressure shifted in precisely calculated ways that made it impossible for the Nexus soldiers to maintain effective combat formations. Lighting systems began strobing in patterns designed to disrupt alien visual processing. Temperature regulation systems created localized hot and cold zones that forced enemy troops into specific corridors and compartments. But the most devastating change was something only Maya fully understood. The station's artificial gravity systems began operating in ways that completely violated normal engineering principles. Gravity vectors shifted and rotated in patterns that human beings could adapt to, thanks to their species' evolutionary experience with complex three-dimensional movement, but which left most other species disoriented and helpless. Impossible, Lieutenant Korvac whispered, watching the tactical display show enemy forces beginning to stumble and fall throughout the station. How is she controlling systems that don't even exist in our technical specifications? Project Nightingale operatives don't just observe and report, Maya explained while continuing to manipulate the station's hidden capabilities. We're deployed with advanced technology that allows us to completely modify the environments we're assigned to protect. Every human colony, space station, and outpost in this sector has been secretly upgraded with similar systems. On the main display, they could see Nexus soldiers struggling to maintain their footing as gravity pulled them in unexpected directions. Some were trapped in corridor sections where atmospheric pressure made their breathing apparatus ineffective. Others found themselves separated from their squad mates by lighting conditions that effectively blinded their visual systems while leaving human defenders completely unaffected. Phase 2 complete, Maya announced. Beginning Phase 3. She stepped away from the tactical console and headed toward the command center's main exit. When Vextar called after her, she paused in the doorway. "Where are you going?" the commander demanded. Maya's expression was calm, but absolutely deadly. To finish this personally, the Nexus Collective wanted to see what humans are capable of when we stop pretending to be harmless. She disappeared into the corridor, leaving the command staff to watch in amazement as the tactical display began showing impossible readings. A single human signature was moving through the station at inhuman speed, and wherever that signature went, enemy resistance simply vanished. The hunt had begun. Maya moved through the station's corridors like a shadow, given substance and purpose. The environmental modifications she had implemented gave her every possible advantage, but it was her training and enhanced capabilities that made her truly dangerous. Every step was calculated, every movement was precise, and every encounter with Nexus forces was over before the enemy soldiers even realized they were under attack. The first squad she encountered was trying to establish a defensive position near the primary life support junction. 5 heavily armed soldiers in advanced combat armor, their weapons trained on the approaches to their position. They never saw her coming. Maya approached from above, using maintenance shafts that the station blueprints didn't show existed. She dropped into the middle of their formation and disabled all 5 soldiers in less than 8 seconds. No weapons fired, no alarms sounded, and no communications were sent. They simply collapsed unconscious, their equipment neatly arranged beside them. In the command center, the tactical display showed the enemy position simply blink out of existence. How is this possible? Theron demanded, his crystalline features reflecting the red emergency lighting. Our sensors show no weapons discharge, no explosions, nothing that should cause 5 trained soldiers to disappear. Vextar studied the readouts with growing amazement. She's not fighting them. She's hunting them. Throughout the station, similar scenes were playing out with terrifying efficiency. Maya's enhanced senses allowed her to track enemy movements through walls and bulkheads. Her training let her predict their tactical decisions before they made them. Most importantly, her complete understanding of the station's modified systems meant she could control the battlefield in ways that normal warfare never allowed. A squad of Nexus soldiers trying to reach the main computer core found themselves trapped in a corridor where gravity rotated 90 degrees every few seconds. By the time they managed to adapt to the disorienting environment, Maya had already moved past them and sealed the access hatches. They were effectively removed from the battle without a single shot being fired. Another team attempting to secure the weapons control center discovered that the atmospheric composition in their target area had been modified to create a dense, clinging fog that rendered their advanced targeting systems useless. When they tried to advance blindly, they found themselves face-to-face with a small human woman who moved like liquid death. The engagement lasted exactly 4 seconds. War leader Kythex watched the tactical displays aboard his flagship with growing alarm. His carefully planned assault was falling apart, and he couldn't understand why. His forces had achieved all their initial objectives. They controlled key strategic points throughout the station. By every measure, the operation should be succeeding brilliantly. Instead, his soldiers were disappearing, not dying. The medical telemetry from their armor showed they were merely unconscious, but becoming combat ineffective with impossible speed and efficiency. How many troops have we lost? He demanded of his tactical officer. Lost is not accurate, war leader. 347 soldiers have gone offline, but their vital signs indicate they are alive and uninjured. They simply stopped responding to communications. Kythex's fists clenched in frustration. One human child is doing this. That's impossible. Our intelligence reports suggested the humans were newcomers to galactic warfare, with minimal combat experience and inferior technology. The tactical officer replied nervously. Perhaps our information was incomplete. The truth was becoming undeniably clear. The Nexus Collective had based their entire strategy on the assumption that humans were weak, naive, and unprepared for serious military conflict. They had seen Earth's small colonial presence and assumed the species lacked the capability for effective defense. They had never considered that humanity might be deliberately concealing their true capabilities. Maya continued her systematic elimination of enemy forces, but she was also gathering intelligence that would prove far more valuable than any tactical victory. Each unconscious Nexus soldier carried equipment that revealed important details about their technology, their communication systems, and their strategic plans. She paused in a maintenance corridor to examine a command tablet taken from a squad leader. The data it contained made her blood run cold. This assault on Kepler Station wasn't the main operation. It was just a preliminary test. The Nexus Collective was planning coordinated attacks on 17 human colonies simultaneously, using the intelligence gathered here to refine their tactics for the larger campaign. But there was something else in the data that was even more disturbing. The Nexus leadership believed they had identified a fundamental weakness in human psychology. They planned to use captured civilians as leverage to force military surrenders, assuming the humans would sacrifice strategic advantages to protect non-combatants. Maya's expression hardened as she absorbed the implications. The enemy had made a critical error in judgment. They thought human compassion was a weakness to be exploited. They were about to learn that nothing was more dangerous than threatening the people humans cared about. She activated her communication link to the command center. Commander Vextar, I need to speak with you immediately. Lieutenant Commander, are you safe? Our sensors show massive Nexus troop movements in your area. The troops in my area are no longer a concern, Maya replied grimly. But we have a bigger problem. This attack is a test run for something much larger. I'm uploading enemy intelligence data to your tactical systems now. In the command center, the staff watched in shock as detailed Nexus strategic plans filled their displays. The scope of the planned offensive was staggering, a coordinated assault designed to cripple human colonial expansion before it could gain momentum. They're targeting civilian populations specifically, Vextar observed with disgust. This violates every principle of civilized warfare. It gets worse, Maya continued over the communication link. They believe humans will abandon defensive positions to protect non-combatants. Their entire strategy is based on exploiting what they perceive as our emotional weakness. Lieutenant Korvak leaned forward, studying the tactical projections. If they're right, they could force surrenders without major losses to their own forces. They're not right. Maya's voice carried a cold certainty that made everyone in the command center pay attention. They fundamentally misunderstand human psychology. We don't become weaker when our civilians are threatened. We become absolutely ruthless. To prove her point, Maya began implementing Protocol 77 Charlie. The remaining Nexus forces aboard the station suddenly found themselves facing environmental conditions that were no longer merely disorienting. They were actively hostile. Atmospheric pressure began cycling in patterns that made their breathing equipment malfunction. Temperature differentials created localized storm systems in enclosed spaces. Most dramatically, the station's artificial gravity systems began generating effects that violated basic physics. Computer, display current enemy force status, Maya commanded. The tactical display showed that nearly 600 Nexus soldiers were now combat ineffective. More importantly, their flagship was beginning to detect the impossible environmental conditions aboard the station through their soldiers' telemetry feeds. War leader Kythex stared at readings that made no sense according to any known technology. Gravity wasn't supposed to work in spirals. Atmospheric pressure couldn't create localized temporal distortions. And no known species could move through such hostile environments with complete impunity. Recall all boarding parties immediately, he ordered. We're facing something we don't understand. But it was too late for an orderly withdrawal. Maya had spent the last hour systematically disabling the Nexus soldiers' transportation systems. Their boarding pods were offline, their emergency teleporters had been sabotaged, and the shuttle bays they had seized were now sealed behind security barriers that their equipment couldn't breach. War leader, our forces are trapped aboard the station, his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic. Their extraction systems are not responding. Maya's voice suddenly filled the flagship's communication systems, somehow bypassing their most advanced security protocols. War leader Kythex, this is Lieutenant Commander Maya Chun of Earth Defense Force Special Operations. Your invasion force is now my prisoner. You have exactly 5 minutes to withdraw your fleet from this system, or I will demonstrate why humans don't make idle threats. Kythex's response was immediate and predictably arrogant. Human child, you may have trapped my soldiers, but they are expendable. My ships can reduce your station to debris regardless of who is aboard. Your soldiers are not expendable to me, Maya replied, and something in her tone made the war leader pause. I don't sacrifice lives unnecessarily, even enemy lives. But if you force me to choose between their survival and the protection of human civilians, the choice is very simple. On the tactical display, Kythex watched in amazement as his own fleet's defensive systems began showing anomalous readings. Somehow, impossibly, the human was accessing his ship's computer networks from inside the station. That's impossible, he whispered. Our systems are completely isolated. Maya's laugh was soft, but completely without humor. War leader, you made the same mistake every enemy of humanity has made. You assumed we were limited by the same rules that constrain everyone else. The demonstration that followed would haunt Kythex's nightmares for the rest of his life. Every system aboard his flagship began operating according to human specifications rather than Nexus programming. Life support shifted to human optimal atmosphere composition. Artificial gravity reoriented to human comfort levels. Even the lighting changed to match the wavelengths preferred by human vision. Maya wasn't just hacking their systems. She was rewriting the fundamental operating parameters of technology that should have been completely incompatible with human engineering. For minutes, war leader, her voice announced calmly. I suggest you begin your withdrawal immediately. The war for Kepler Station was over, but the real war was just beginning. War leader Kythex faced the most humiliating decision of his military career. His sensors showed that the humans somehow controlled not just her own station, but was actively manipulating his fleet's systems from a distance that should have made such interference impossible. Every tactical advantage his forces had possessed was now working against them. War leader, we must withdraw, his second-in-command urged. Our technical staff cannot explain how she is accessing our networks, but she has demonstrated complete control over our defensive systems. Kythex stared at the tactical display showing Kepler Station. Such a small facility, defended by such a tiny human female, had just defeated the most powerful assault force in Nexus collective history. The implications went far beyond this single engagement. Signal the fleet, he ordered reluctantly. All ships, prepare for immediate hyperspace jump. What about our forces aboard the station? The war leader's expression was grim. The human claims she doesn't sacrifice lives unnecessarily. We'll discover if she was telling the truth. Maya watched from a station's command center as the Nexus fleet began powering their hyperspace drives. She had won this engagement, but the victory felt incomplete. The enemy had learned about human capabilities, but they still didn't understand the true scope of what they were facing. Commander Vextar, she announced, I need to address the entire Nexus fleet before they escape. You want to communicate with them again? I want to deliver a message that will prevent this from happening to other human colonies. With the command center's communication array boosted by the station's hidden systems, Maya's voice reached every ship in the retreating Nexus fleet. But this time, her transmission was also being recorded and broadcast across subspace frequencies that would carry it throughout the galaxy. War leader Kythex and all forces of the Nexus Collective, I want you to understand what happened here today. You attacked this station believing humans were weak, inexperienced, and easy targets. You planned to use our compassion against us, to exploit what you saw as emotional weakness. The retreating ships continued their preparations for hyperspace jump, but Maya could detect that her transmission was being monitored by intelligence vessels from multiple species throughout the sector. Word of this engagement would spread rapidly. You made a fundamental error in judgment. Human compassion is not weakness. It is the source of our greatest strength. When you threaten the people we protect, you don't make us more willing to surrender. You make us utterly implacable. In the command center, Vextar and his staff watched the tactical display showing the enormous Nexus fleet preparing to flee from a single space station defended by one human woman. The symbolic impact was staggering. Every species in the galaxy has been watching humanity expand into space, wondering what we would do when faced with real military opposition. Today, you provided that test. The results should be instructive for anyone considering similar attacks. Maya paused, allowing her words to sink in across the multiple intelligence networks that were monitoring the transmission. Project Nightingale has been secretly deployed to protect human civilian populations throughout this sector. Every colony, every station, every settlement you might consider targeting has been similarly prepared. We are not the naive newcomers you assumed us to be. The largest Nexus ship began its hyperspace transition, its massive hull disappearing into the swirling vortex of interdimensional space. One by one, the other vessels followed, abandoning their prisoners and retreating from what should have been an easy victory. But, more importantly, Maya continued, you should understand that Project Nightingale represents just one aspect of human defensive capability. We have been preparing for galactic warfare much longer than anyone realizes. The galaxy is about to discover that underestimating humanity is a very dangerous mistake. When the last enemy ship disappeared into hyperspace, Kepler Station fell silent except for the normal sounds of life support and mechanical systems. Maya remained at the tactical console, monitoring long-range sensors for any indication that the Nexus forces might return. Lieutenant Commander Vextar said quietly, "What happens to the captured enemy soldiers?" Maya had been expecting this question. Standard prisoner protocols apply. They'll be held securely until prisoner exchanges can be arranged. Despite what their leadership believes, humans don't execute helpless captives. And the broader implications of this engagement? Word of what happened here will spread throughout the galaxy within days, Maya replied. Every species with expansionist ambitions will be reassessing their strategic plans. Some will be deterred by the demonstration of human capability. Others will be encouraged to form alliances with us rather than risk becoming enemies. She paused, studying intelligence reports that were already arriving through secure Earth defense channels. But a few species will see this as a challenge rather than a warning. They'll want to test our defenses directly. Are you prepared for that possibility? Maya's smile was sharp and predatory. Commander, there are 47 other Nightingale operatives currently deployed throughout this sector. Every one of them has been watching these events with great interest. Any species foolish enough to attack human colonies will discover that I'm not unique. I'm just the first one they've encountered. Over the following days, the political ramifications of the Kepler Station engagement rippled throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Trade Council emergency session was dominated by discussions of human military capability. Several species that had been considering aggressive expansion into human-controlled space quietly abandoned their plans. More importantly, 3 major civilizations requested formal alliance negotiations with Earth. Maya resumed her cover identity as a research assistant, but the pretense was now transparent to everyone aboard the station. Dr. Kim no longer worried about her safety during pirate alerts. Dr. Yilmaz stopped offering fatherly advice about station life. Even the cafeteria workers treated her with the respect due a senior military officer. But the most significant change was in how the various alien personnel viewed humanity as a whole. Where once they had seen humans as inexperienced newcomers requiring protection and guidance, they now recognized them as a species that had been carefully planning their galactic emergence for decades. The research section had been repaired and upgraded, incorporating some of the defensive modifications that Maya had revealed during the crisis. She worked at her geological survey assignments with the same dedication as before, but now her colleagues understood that she was simultaneously monitoring threat assessments and military intelligence from across the sector. 3 weeks after the attack, Maya received a coded transmission that made her smile for the first time since arriving at Kepler Station. The message was brief and to the point. Nightingale 7 mission objectives exceeded. New assignment authorization pending. Prepare for extraction. She looked around the research section one final time, taking in the faces of colleagues who had become genuine friends despite the deception necessary to maintain her cover. Dr. Kim was working on atmospheric analysis that would improve food production efficiency. Dr. Yilmaz was cataloging mineral deposits that would supply construction materials for expanding human colonies. These people represented the future that Project Nightingale had been created to protect. Scientists, engineers, and civilian specialists who were building something unprecedented in galactic history. A human presence based on cooperation and mutual benefit rather than conquest and exploitation. Maya's replacement would arrive within days, another Nightingale operative who would blend seamlessly into the station's population while maintaining vigilant watch for threats to human civilians. The protection would continue invisible but absolute. The galaxy had learned an important lesson at Kepler Station. Humanity was not weak, inexperienced, or easy to intimidate. They were a species that planned carefully, prepared extensively, and protected their own with absolute determination. But perhaps more importantly, they were a species that fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right to explore the stars and build better lives for their children. That motivation made them more dangerous than any conventional military force, because it meant they would never stop, never surrender, and never accept defeat when the stakes involved protecting innocent lives. War leader Kythex had learned this lesson at the cost of his reputation and most of his assault force. Other potential enemies would hopefully prove wiser and more cautious. But Maya knew that some would not. And when they came, they would discover that the galaxy's newest spacefaring species was ready for them. The human girl they had thought was weak had proven them wrong in the most decisive way possible. And she was just the beginning.